Hello, Charlie TCG here. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about Raging Bolt, a deck which has actually cooked up an absolute storm of the ancient version of Raikou in the TCG. We've seen the brand new rotation has hit in Japan this past weekend. Just how has it performed? I'm going to break down my list, my thoughts and feelings, and matchup wise for this one. And this is an archetype you should be testing, getting ready for EUIC or in general post rotation. So in Japan, it did pretty okay, getting a win and a top 4 in the City League results. But what here is the shine is the 11 wins it got in the gym battle, basically a smaller version of the league, like basically league challenges. What I like about it is there's a ton of creativity with Gardevoir, with Palkia, with Sandy Shocks, a ton of ways that NG Accelerate to really fuel its attacking option. But what exactly does it do? 70 damage times the amount of energy you discard from your Pokemon in play. Now this is very, very powerful. Sounding Shocks is kind of like the obvious contender. It works well with fighting energy. It works well if your opponent has taken 2 or more prize cards, but it does take a while to get that set up. But it does work with that late game synergy, which is what this deck really needs. But is it too much to get going? A lot of people are drawing very much similarities to the Reshiram and Zekrom Tag Team GX, which had a very, very similar attack, had a very, very similar sort of setup, and definitely fizzled out because no one really was playing with it because it took too much to get set up. But without further ado, let's jump right into the deck profile where I think the deck is kind of like situated. We play 3 copies of Raging Bolt. I don't think you need to play any more. I think 3 is a very, very good sort of number for this archetype. You need it for constantly its attacking option, first or for constantly it's your main attacker in the deck, but also a secondary attack, the first attack, getting that extra discard effect and draw a TF6 is not too bad. 3 copies of Sandy Shock EX, the amazing ability which when your opponent has got 4 or less prize cards, you get to activate it, which gets to attach an energy from your discard pile to Sandy Shocks. This works really well by fueling out the attacking options with Raging Bolt. You don't have to rely on Professor Sada constantly to get the energies out in play, you can have Sandy Shocks as well. Crydon is your other secondary attacking option, your single prize one, by doing 30 damage times the amount of ancient Pokemon you have in play. If you have every single one of them out here, you're doing 180 damage. Pretty good, but in theory, you're going to be doing maybe like 90 to 120 if you've got 3 or 4 out in play. This is really good, especially against some of the single prize attacking options. Getting rid of the likes of some Charmanders, some Rolts, and heck, even some Bats are very, very strong. We're not using it for a shred attack because we're not playing any fire energies. Then we play a ton of support Pokemon. Mew EX, Squawkabilly EX, Radiant Greninja, and Lumineon V. Now you might go, that's a ton of support Pokemon. If we're going to have all of these on the bench, how are we ever going to get attacking options around here? Well, that's definitely something to be considerate, especially in your early game. Mew EX is very, very powerful. That restart ability, which is drawing to you have 6. It's going to help you definitely fuel out because you've got to draw a ton of cards. Works really well in the late game, especially against an Iono. So definitely something which is much more of a stronger effect in the late game. Squawkabilly is really good in the early game, but Squawka seeds discard your hand and draw it to you have 6. What I like about this one, especially if you're trying to dig for that big one-hit KO, that's exactly where Squawkabilly can really fit in. You can play Sada as well as Squawkabilly, so you can draw a ton of cards, get that set up, potentially get Raging Bolt to do 100 and 210 damage very much early on in the game. Radiant Greninja is that really good draw factor. It fuels the discard power, works well with Sandy Shock as well as also Stardust Fatality, but getting that in that discard and getting that additional draw factor. Again, not exactly always needed, but definitely really good in a pinch. And Lumineon to get out of your Sada. It's very much similar to like the early Roaring Moonless. We're kind of like focusing on a Sada box, drawing anything to try and get out of that turn 1 Sada. Similar how Lost Zone decks work well trying to get out of that Chorus, especially as early as possible. This really helps. Our aspect of choice is Prime Catcher. Boss's Orders and a switch as an item card. Yes, please. Very, very strong, very, very powerful. I think it's one of the best sort of synergies with this deck as well. Kind of like fueling off any of it. Like, we have a lot of support Pokemon, your opponent might have a lot of support Pokemon. Kind of like feeding off that, getting rid of some bigger attacking options beforehand is just super, super good. Our item cards, we do play 1 copy of Power Pad and Super Rod. Because we are going to be drawing through the deck quite quickly, this is really, really good to constantly streamline attacking options as well as also your supporters. You want to play potentially at least 6 Professor Stardust Fatality after you use your 4 as well. Get additional 2 of that Power Pad is a super, super good. Pokegear helps us find that one. Switch cards helps you get out your Pokemon out because we might potentially get some stall in the way. Stall is very, very popular right now. So having multiple switching outs is just super, super powerful. It works really well with any of the EXP shares on the bench, getting out them in the action spot. It's just super good. We play 4 copies of Nest Ball and 4 copies of Ultra Ball. We don't play any Battle VIP bars because it's rotated out now. So these are the best draw sort of search cards we need in this deck. 4 Orphan Vessel, it works by gaining energies in your hand and energies in a discard pile. Need I say less? Very, very powerful. And finally, 4 copies of Trekking Shoes. Again, have that synergy by getting stuff in the discard pile, while also drawing it through multiple of your deck. Try and find out the Professor Sardis, so you're constantly streamlining this energy acceleration that deck absolutely requires. The support account, we do play 1 Boss's Orders, 1 Iono, and 4 Professor Sardis Fatality. Boss's Orders, it works really, really well. I know we already have Prime Catcher as our ace-spec of choice, but Boss's Orders is just super, super strong, especially as that supporting option, which we generally need to have. As much gusting effect this deck really requires is just super good. Iono is really good in the early game for that setup, but also the late game for that extra really good destructive capability. And obviously for Sardis Fatality, this is kind of like the big function of this deck, kind of similar how Roy Moon became a strong archetype because of Professor Sardis Fatality. Raging Bolt will become a really strong deck because of Professor Sardis Fatality. You can target multiple of your ancient Pokemon to get an energy acceleration into play, and also that 3 drawing factors is super good. Sorry about that. Now, our stadium card of choice is Town Store. You could opt to go Charlie. You'll play a ton of item cards. Why don't you play the likes of Pokestop? Well, I don't want to discard any of my valuable resources, like Professor Sada, like any of these tool cards, as well as also any of my Pokemon cards. So Town Store electing to play that card, well, like I mentioned, is a very, very strong stadium card in the post-rotation. Gets me that EXP share, but more specifically, the Ancient Booster Capture Energy. EXP share just really works as well. If you attach that to a Sandy Shocks, attach that to a Mew, or any of your support Pokemon you have in play, say your Raging Bolt gets knocked out, you can have that energy accelerated right back onto one of your Pokemon in play, and really helps fuel its attack option as well. I really like that option in this deck. There's also HP to capture energy. Not only do you not get affected by special conditions, but you give 300 HP to Raging Bolt. Very, very strong. And our energy splits are 4 lightning and 6 fighting. The reason why we play more fighting, because obviously Sandy Shocks works well with having higher counts of fighting energy, and also the lightning just because we need that for attacking option in Raging Bolt. I think this is a very fun archetype. I played a little bit of these decks right now, and honestly, it's a ton of fun. But what's this matchup spread? Well, honestly, I think it's pretty good overall, especially if it gets that really good turn 1 sort of attacking option. I think can really struggle against the likes of Charizard, Stall, as well as also and the likes of any of Lost Zone sort of decks as well. Stall also works well with Mill because you're drawing for a ton of decks, and Great Tusk can just mill through your entire deck, so it definitely is a bit to consider about. Charizard has this a ton of HP, can be really difficult and pesky to kind of go around it. So it's definitely something which you could like go toe to toe with. It could go to more of an even factor. In a similar way, have Lost Zone as well. They can really target and spread loads of damage around there, not really focusing. Say you can constantly utilize 2 energies to discard with the Skeptic-KO and Sableye, but if they just constantly keep spreading their damage out there, you're not going to make you activate Sandy Shock. So that's definitely something to be considered about. I think definitely some of its favorite ones are like some Future Box, Lugia, Roy Moon, as well as also Miraidon. I think you can easily have a really good toe-to-toe. You can work well with the prize trade by initiating the first KO, and I think this deck can really work with it. Similar how Miraidon got outclassed by Roy Moon because that got the big one-hit kill. I think that Raging Bolt can a little bit go that toe-to-toe especially. I know it can't get the big one-hit kills on Miraidon and Roy Moon, especially in the early game, but having the gusting effect of Prime Catcher, getting rid of one of the like of a Raikou or even a Luminion or a Squawkabilly on your opponent's other side, it can be very much easy and pull it into its favor. We haven't seen Gardevoir really show up recently, especially in the recent events, but I do think it has a pretty even response in that one. They're playing a ton of basic Pokemon, but the basic Pokemon only require 1 engine, to get a KO, so you can kind of like go toe to toe with this one. And the rest of it factor, I think you have a much more even spread. Kind of like focusing a lot more on that energy protective is exactly why I think the deck works. Having the EXP share really helps you, so you can get these big one-hit KOs on the likes of a Lugia, Roy Moon, or even a Giratina V-Star, which is definitely something which I would consider about. So kind of looking at this one, is this actually the next Reshiram? Is it just hype? A lot of people are thinking this deck is purely just a hype deck. A lot of people thought, oh, it's going to be one of the strongest decks, but more and more I'm thinking about this one, I do think it is more of a tier 2 contender. I would love to play this archetype in EUIC, but I generally sometimes more think of a reflection about this deck. It could, in fact, literally just be a little bit of a hype one and become a tier 2. Golden Go took months for it to finally showcase itself to actually be a much more stronger deck than we kind of first gave it credit with it. Could this deck take that a little bit of time as well? Having that sort of like, not basic, I don't know the best way to describe it, marinating it until we get to EUIC, this deck could generally become much, much stronger. And is the energy cost enough? You require basically 4 energies to do 280 damage, 5 energies to pretty much KO anything. That is quite a lot. If you think about it, with an energy attachment plus 2 Professor Sardis Fatality, that's 3 energies already. and you have to have at least 2 energies early on the board or activate from Sandy Shocks to constantly get these big one-hit KOs and things. So it could take quite a while to get these big energy accelerating going. So, my closing thoughts, is this actually the best way to play Raging Bolt? I think potentially there is definitely a lot of room to it. This is the early version. You're probably going to see 1 or 2 different versions of this deck, which I'm going to be talking about as we go into the next rotation. I think it definitely has a little bit of legs to it. One, there's there a little bit of wiggle room as well. Could we go back to Palkia? Could, in fact, the Gardevoir be the best partner with this deck, or is Sandy Shocks the best and most straightforward way? Because it works so many options, especially with the likes of the ancient cards. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little deck profile about Raging Bolt. I hope you guys absolutely love this video, and I will see you guys very, very soon for another one. Comment down below, what is your favorite way to play Raging Bolt? See you guys later. Bye for now.